All right. I'd now like to introduce Allison Reeser, and their client was OneNature, and their advisor was Dr. Bob Cook. Allison?
Good evening. How is everybody tonight? Doing good? Good. My name is Allison Reeser, and it is really an honor to represent my capstone group tonight to present our final briefing titled Integrating Health and Equity into an Economic Valuation of Nature. We work together as a team of 12, plus our faculty advisor, Dr. Bob Cook. Special shout out to Kelsey Moody and Winston Palmeria for taking on the project management roles. And also, fun fact, all of the nature photos that you're about to see in this presentation came from members of our team. Our clients were Beth Allgood from OneNature and Kate Wall from International Fund for Animal Welfare, or IFAW. OneNature and IFAW are both nonprofits with similar missions to help humans and animals coexist. OneNature and IFAW have quite an exciting opportunity at the level of the US government. This past Earth Day, President Biden signed an executive order on strengthening the nation's forests, communities, and local economies. Under the umbrella of this executive order is a mandate to add the value of nature into the US's national accounts, such as GDP. This is being led by the Office of Management and Budget, and they're working with a team of experts and economists to finalize the system for quantifying the value of nature. Now, the good news is that the executive order is open for public comment, and this is where OneNature and IFAW are seizing the opportunity. They are working alongside a coalition of other nonprofits to advocate to include nature's contributions to human health and equity into this valuation. So our clients are faced with a pretty big question. How should we actually do it? How can we reflect nature's contributions to health and equity into an economic valuation? Our capstone's role was to gather and analyze information to help make the case for this more holistic valuation. More specifically, our project had 3 components. We conducted interviews, we created a searchable database containing a thorough literature review, and we analyzed and visualized our findings. Now, early on, we realized that there is a plethora of information that has something to say about nature, human health, equity, economic valuation. So to more methodically approach this work, we first defined nature and we created a system to categorize our findings. Here's how we defined nature. All the things outside of the home that are distinctly not human or man-made. So this includes urban and rural green space. And here's our system to categorize our findings. Everything that we found, from the interviews to the database entries, we put somewhere in the overlaps on this Venn diagram. Notice that health, equity, and economic value all fall within the larger nature circle. So if it didn't have something to say about nature, it was outside of our scope. I'll now take you on a more in-depth tour of our project, beginning with the interviews. Here are the 9 individuals that we spoke with. In our outreach, we targeted experts that were focused on the intersection of human health and nature. You'll also notice here that we have quite a variety of affiliations here. We have people from government, from nonprofit, from academics, and you'll see highlights from them later on. Our database, in total, we added 124 sources to the database, which includes 94 peer-reviewed papers. The health bubble was the largest one, coming in at 38% of our database, whereas the equity and economic value overlap was the smallest, making up 5% of our database. We rolled up our key findings from both the interviews and the literature to inform our analysis. And on the following slides, you're going to see the top findings and conclusions from each of those 6 Venn diagram categories. So beginning with health, we found so much evidence that spending time in nature is good for your physical and mental health, and I don't think this is going to be surprising. Doctors these days are actually prescribing nature doses because they know it will increase happiness, relaxation, self-esteem, and also decrease physical health risks. To show you a little bit more depth here, each of these bullet points is supported by a source that we found or an interview that we conducted. And I wanted to call out too that we found the most evidence that supports mental health benefits. So spending time in nature, there's very strong evidence that it will decrease things like depression, anxiety, and stress. Now, there are efforts to try to put a dollar value on these benefits. A few that we wanted to call out for you tonight come from the UN Global Environment Outlook 6th report, which puts costs associated with environmental damage, including health-related costs from pollution, of $4.6 trillion annually globally. Another fun one was that when you spend more time out in nature, you're more productive at work, and the value of that increased productivity comes in at $2.1 trillion per year. The economic value of nature is an extensive field of research, and I wanted to call out too that our clients do have access to the work that the Office of Management and Budget is doing. Our research did highlight that different economic valuation calculations already exist for specific ecosystem services, such as pollination. We also found that the widely used statistic from the Living Planet Index is that nature globally is valued at $125 trillion. The sources that we did find at the overlap of equity and economic value really highlight that the livelihoods of poor and Indigenous communities really rely on nature and biodiversity in order to survive. And unfortunately, as biodiversity and these natural resources are threatened, those communities are at risk, but measures like GDP do not take that into account. They are not good measures of societal progress. It is also well documented that lower socioeconomic communities in the United States especially do not have equal access to nature. This is driven in part by unjust practices such as redlining. We also found that growing up near green space is linked to social mobility. This is things like increased academic success and career success. Our analysis of health and equity show that urban green space can be a strategy for cities to try to decrease the health disparities that they're experiencing. However, the direct correlation to the health outcomes is a little bit inconsistent. This is because when you add green space to a neighborhood, it usually leads to gentrification. Another complication is that if you add green space, it has to be safe to actually reap the benefits of that green space. We also found that biodiversity can help alleviate poverty for Indigenous communities. Now, this overlap of health and equity was especially important for our clients. So I wanted to show you a little bit more detail here of some of the examples we found to support that increased access to nature does have some really positive social and environmental justice outcomes. So now I think I've made the case, and you all will probably agree, that nature is incredibly valuable and beneficial. But our analysis highlighted a key challenge, that this topic is incredibly complex and it lacks consensus. For example, there's really no universal agreement or alignment on how we should measure health. Is it blood pressure? Is it prevalence of disease? There's also no agreement about how to measure prosperity. The alternatives to GDP, such as the UN Human Development Index, are weakened by incomplete or inconsistent information. And finally, there are vastly differing perspectives on how we should approach the solution. For example, Indigenous beliefs of nature and land-based healing practices are very different from an economic Western perspective. Given these challenges, it's not surprising that our gap analysis revealed that there really is no one source or strategy to talk about the health and equity components of nature in an economic way. But there is a critical need to fill this gap as the US government is approaching their work to come up with this valuation. Fortunately, our research and analysis that we've conducted will help our clients, OneNature and IFAW, to help fill this research gap. And we really recommend that with their coalition, they focus on driving alignment on those measures. So we wanted to make sure that what we gave our clients was very useful and beneficial. So we worked closely with them to come up with the best ways and most useful ways to convey the information. We came up with two strategies. First off, we created these one-page analysis summaries. We created one for each of those 6 overlapping areas on the Venn diagram. In this example here, you can see that they all include key findings, gaps, and recommendations, and are in a very quick and easy format to access this information. Secondly, we created a web page using the tool Story Maps from ArcGIS. OneNature has agreed to publish this on their website publicly, so we're very excited about that. And it's where people can access the database, the interviews, and our analysis. They're very excited about this tool as a way to share information with their stakeholders and the coalition. And we really hope that what we found this semester ultimately makes a more holistic valuation of nature. So that's the end of my presentation. I will now take questions.
Hi, great presentation, by the way. I was just wondering if your group considered the issue of correlation versus causation, especially hearing the thing about nature and health. I'm wondering if you're going out to nature, if, for example, hiking, that means physical activity, that has also, you can see benefits in health with physical activity. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit to that.
Sure, yeah. I will say that's one of the research gaps that we identified, is that there's a lack of saying that like this specific animal or this specific volatile organic compound coming out of a tree, how that directly impacts your health. And that's also what complicates it too, because we did address physical activity in some of our interviews, which you can do without nature. So I don't think I have an answer to your question, but thank you for asking it, because it's certainly an element that complicates it.
Hi, great presentation. I saw you were able to get a lot of expert interviews conducted. How was that process getting those booked, and how helpful was that to your analysis?
Yeah, shout out to Bev, who led our interview task team. I'll just show you the names again so you can see. Oh, maybe not. I have too many slides. I don't want to do that to Chandler. So we did get an initial list from our clients. So that was a huge leg up. They provided recommendations and people that we should reach out to. We also had a list of people who kept on showing up in our database sources as authors. I don't think that we actually got to interview any of those, but it was an interesting way to reach out to them. I know that we used our Columbia connections and connections that people knew about, and our interview task team worked really closely to make sure that we had an outreach email that made sense and got all the right permissions and stuff. So I know that we did reach out to a lot more people that we were able to actually interview, but that was a little bit about our process.
Hi, thank you again. You did a wonderful job. I believe it was on the intersection between economic value and equity. You mentioned how biodiversity has been seen to help lift members of Indigenous communities out of poverty. Can you just elaborate on how like biodiversity had that impact and how it was tracked?
Yeah, I think from an Indigenous perspective, obviously nature is not separate from humanity. And so again, I don't think that, I'm not recalling that we found a study that said like this biodiversity is like directly relating to this community's health. But like overall, we know that Indigenous communities, and actually all communities, rely on the interconnected web. So I think I would need to look a little bit more deeper in the sources that discuss that, but thank you for bringing it up because it's an important topic. Thank you.